Trying to truly understand something as massive, as complex as global conflict from the last century or so, it can feel, well, pretty overwhelming.
It really can. You're faced with this huge sweep of history. So many details.
But what if we could kind of zero in on the core ideas, the essential connections that explain how we got from then to now?
That's exactly what we're aiming for in this deep dive.
Right.
Today, we're tackling a really significant period,
Right.
global conflict, from 1900 up to the present day.
And we've pulled together quite a range of sources for you, trying to cut through the noise.
Everything from those big picture analyses of shifting world power all the way down to, detailed accounts of the human cost of these wars.
Our goal here is to give you a clear and hopefully an engaging grasp of the key themes, those underlying currents that link events that might seem separate.
And those surprising insights, too, the things that make history really click.
Yeah, exactly. We want to arm you with a solid understanding, but without, burying you under an avalanche of dates and names.
So where should we kick things off to unpack all this?
I think a crucial starting point has to be looking at the global power dynamics, right? At the dawn of the 20th century.
Absolutely, because we saw several major empires, these huge entities that had been dominant for centuries, starting to falter. Some even collapsed entirely.
Right. Think of them like these old, maybe slightly crumbling structures,
Yeah.
showing serious cracks, both internally and from outside pressures.
Take the Ottoman Empire, for example.
Okay.
You had this push for modern reforms, groups like the Young Ottomans, but then a real authoritarian backlash against that.
Which then paved the way for the Young Turks, right?
Exactly. They were really pushing to modernize, taking inspiration from the West, things like secularizing education, holding elections.
And even pushing Turkish as the main language, which
Ah.
caused its own problems, I imagine.
It did. And what's fascinating is how that drive for a sort of unified Turkish identity actually inadvertently sped up the empire's decline. Well, by alienating various ethnic minorities within its borders, Arabs, for instance, it fueled their own nationalist feelings.
Ah, okay. Contributing to the empire eventually breaking apart after World War I.
Precisely. Then you had the Russian Empire under the Tsars.
Right. Autocratic rule, but some industrialization happening.
Yes, but that created its own issues. A growing middle class getting frustrated with the Tsar's absolute power, and a working class facing really tough conditions.
Which all kind of boiled over in the 1905 revolution.
It did. That forced the Tsar into some temporary reforms, but he didn't really give up much power in the long run.
And then came World War I.
Exactly. The immense pressures of the war, they just magnified all those existing weaknesses.
Acting as the final breaking point.
Leading straight to the 1917 revolution, Lenin, the Bolsheviks, and ultimately the Soviet Union, a totally different kind of state.
And we can't forget King China either. They were dealing with, well, a lot. Internal rebellions like the Taiping.
Which was absolutely devastating. Millions died.
And then those humiliating defeats in the Opium Wars and the Sino-Japanese War.
Plus the Boxer Rebellion, where foreign powers actually intervened militarily. That really showed how weak the Qing dynasty had become.
It raises that question, doesn't it? How internal problems make a state vulnerable to outside forces.
It does. The Boxer Rebellion sort of intensified calls for change, leading to Sun Yat-sen's revolution.
Finally ending thousands of years of imperial rule.
Though, of course, that wasn't the end of China's struggles. A long civil war followed, eventually bringing the communists to power.
Now, it's interesting to contrast those collapsing empires with what happened in Mexico, the Mexican Revolution.
Yes, also a challenge to the old order, the long rule of Porfirio Diaz.
Who'd managed to tick off pretty much everyone, right? Across all social classes.
Widespread discontent, definitely. And you had major figures like Pancho Villa and Emiliano Zapata leading these powerful peasant movements.
But its impact was mostly internal, compared to Russia or China.
Largely, yes, it was an intense internal conflict, but it led to a republic and some really significant social reforms. Universal male suffrage, minimum wages, limiting the church's power.
But it didn't reshape global geopolitics in quite the same way.
Not to the same extent, no.
Okay, so we've got these major shifts happening, empires weakening or falling. How did all this instability set the stage for World War I? Let's dig into the causes.
A really helpful way to remember the main long-term factors is that acronym, MAIN.
MAIN.
Okay. Militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. Let's maybe break those down a bit.
Sounds good. So militarism first. It wasn't just about having big armies, was it?
No, it was more the belief that military power was the key to national strength and security,
Yeah.
and there was a serious arms race going on,
Especially after German unification. Created a new powerhouse.
right in the center of Europe, which made established powers like Britain, with its huge navy, pretty nervous.
Leading to that costly naval arms race between Britain and Germany.
And this competition, it wasn't just about counting ships. It created this deep climate of suspicion, constant rivalry.
Each side seeing the others build up as a direct threat, a dangerous cycle.
Exactly. Then you have alliances.
The two big blocs, the Triple Alliance, Germany, Italy, Austria-Hungary, and the Triple Entente, Britain, France, Russia.
Formed for security, basically. Protection against rivals or maybe trying to isolate them.
But these weren't just vague promises, were they? They had real teeth.
That's the crucial part. They came with incredibly detailed military mobilization plans. Complex stuff.
Using the new railway networks to move troops quickly.
But the plans were so intricate, so time-sensitive, that once you started mobilization...
It was almost impossible to hit the brakes.
Yeah.
Made de-escalation incredibly difficult.
Very much so. Okay, next is imperialism.
The scramble for colonies. That had been going on for a while, but it was still intense, right?
Absolutely. Having a big empire was seen as vital for global power, for resources.
And Germany, being newer and powerful, wanted its place in the sun, so to speak.
Which inevitably put it in competition with Britain and France, the established colonial powers.
Creating more friction, more resentment.
And this jostling for colonies just reinforced those alliance systems. Nations looked for security against their imperial rivals.
Right. And finally, nationalism.
A really powerful force, intense national pride, often paired with seeing other nations as rivals, even enemies.
And this wasn't just popular sentiment, it was actively promoted.
Oh, yes. Through schools, the military, the press, instilling this idea that your nation was supreme and constantly under threat.
Making diplomatic compromise really hard. Everyone's dug in.
Exactly. So MAIN, those were the deep underlying conditions, the powder keg, essentially.
But what was the spark? The specific event that lit the fuse?
That was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand.
Heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. Killed by Gavrilo Princip, a Serbian nationalist.
In the Balkans, a real hotspot of tensions already. It started as a regional crisis.
But the alliances dragged everyone in.
Precisely. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, felt it had to react forcefully. Serbia had ties to the Entente powers.
And suddenly this localized event spirals outwards.
The rigidity of the alliance system took that Balkan crisis and just amplified it into a full-scale global war.
Okay, so the war starts. How was it actually fought? You said earlier it was unlike anything before.
It truly was. World War I is often called the first total war,
Total war, meaning
meaning the lines blurred. Between soldiers on the front and civilians back home, entire societies had to mobilize everything, people, industry, money, for the war effort.
and propaganda played a huge role in that mobilization.
Massive. Governments on all sides churned out information, often biased, sometimes just false, to demonize the enemy.
To build unity, make people feel the sacrifices were necessary, fighting against pure evil.
And the scale of it was unprecedented. Newspapers, posters, even early films, all pushing this nationalistic fervor, this hatred of the enemy.
But it wasn't just minds being mobilized. The actual fighting was transformed by new technology, wasn't it?
Dramatically. And the tactics often hadn't caught up, which was tragic.
Like the machine gun.
Its rate of fire basically made those old-style infantry charges suicidal, just mowing people down.
And poison gas.
Horrific. Chlorine, phosgene, mustard gas, causing terrible injuries, leading to gas masks becoming standard kit.
And you had early tanks appearing, submarines.
German U-boats, yeah.
Yeah.
A major threat to shipping. And airplanes first for spotting, then armed with guns, dogfights.
And the defining image for many, trench warfare.
Miles and miles of opposing trenches, offering protection, sure, but leading to this static, brutal stalemate.
Attacks across no man's land, resulting in horrific casualties.
Often for very little gain, it became a war of attrition on an unimaginable scale. Years of deadlock, constant danger.
And it was truly global, involving troops from empires around the world.
Yes, European powers drew heavily on their colonies. Troops from Africa, India, China, Southeast Asia, Australia, Canada, New Zealand.
And the reasons for fighting varied. Some conscripted, others hoping for something in return.
Exactly. Many hoped their service would lead to more autonomy, maybe even independence after the war.
Hopes that were often dashed, unfortunately.
Sadly, yes. For many, those promises weren't kept.
What was the turning point? How did it finally end?
A major turning point was the U.S. entering the war in 1917.
Why did they join so late?
Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare was a key factor sinking neutral ships like the Lusitania, and the Zimmermann telegram didn't help Germany's case.
The telegram proposing an alliance with Mexico against the U.S.
That's the one. That really pushed the U.S. over the edge.
And the arrival of fresh American troops and industry must have shifted the balance.
It did. It tipped the scales decisively in favor of the Allies. Eventually, the Central Powers were defeated.
Leading to the Treaty of Versailles. Intended to bring peace, but problematic.
Deeply problematic. That's a critical point. President Wilson wanted a peace without victory, more lenient.
But Britain and France wanted to punish Germany.
Understandably, given their immense losses, they were determined to make Germany pay, literally and figuratively.
And those conflicting aims baked into the treaty. They sowed the seeds for future trouble.
Absolutely. Laid the groundwork for resentment and instability in the years to come.
So the war ends, but the economic fallout was huge. Let's talk about the interwar economy. Sounds like chaos.
It really was. The reparations imposed on Germany by Versailles were crippling,
And their government tried to print money to pay.
which led to catastrophic hyperinflation. The German currency became virtually worthless, devastating for the economy.
Prices doubling, tripling, hourly. It's hard to even imagine.
And it had ripple effects. Made it harder for the Allies, like Britain and France, to repay their war debts to the U.S.
Because Germany couldn't pay them. And the colonies felt the pinch, too.
Definitely. Their economies were tied to the European powers, so they suffered from the disruption. The new Soviet Union just refused to pay Tsarist debts altogether.
Was there any recovery?
There was a brief period of apparent stability around 1924, mostly thanks to big loans from the U.S. to Germany.
Helping Germany pay reparations so the Allies could pay the U.S. A fragile cycle.
Incredibly fragile, heavily reliant on that flow of American money.
Meanwhile, the Soviet Union was on a completely different economic path. Lenin's new economic policy. It was a bit surprising, wasn't it? Allowing some free markets.
It was pragmatic. Lenin saw the need for a temporary injection of capitalist energy after years of war and revolution.
But only temporary.
Explicitly so. After Lenin died, Stalin took things in a much more centralized, controlled direction.
With the 5-year plans, aiming for rapid industrialization.
Yes, massive state control, often brutal methods, and linked to that was collectivization in agriculture.
Forcing peasants onto large state-run farms.
Exactly. It met fierce resistance, especially from wealthier peasants, the kulaks.
And Stalin's response was harsh.
Brutal. Millions arrested, executed, sent to labor camps, and the collective farms themselves often struggled. Productivity dropped.
And the human cost,
Yeah.
particularly in Ukraine, the Holodomor.
Absolutely devastating. A man-made famine. The state seized grain even as people starved, prevented them from leaving to find food. Millions died.
It's just horrific. Then, as if things weren't unstable enough, 1929.
The U.S. stock market crash, triggering the Great Depression.
And because economies were so interconnected by then.
It spread globally, very quickly. Many nations relied on U.S. investment post-WWI. That dried up.
And things like the Smoot-Hawley tariff in the U.S. just made it worse.
By raising tariffs, it choked off international trade, deepened the crisis everywhere, including the colonies again.
So governments, which had mostly stayed out of economies before, felt they had to step in.
Increasingly, yes. Laissez-faire wasn't cutting it. We saw different responses.
Like the New Deal in the U.S. under Roosevelt.
Right. Government programs, infrastructure projects, Social Security, unemployment insurance, though there's debate on how much it ended the Depression versus WWII providing the real boost.
And the fascist regimes had their own approach. Corporatism.
In Italy and Germany, yes. State control through industry corporations, aiming for national unity, war preparation. Private property remained, but the state directed everything, limited worker rights severely.
And elsewhere, like Brazil or Mexico.
More state-led development there, too. Vargas in Brazil, Cardenas in Mexico, trying to reduce foreign dependence, nationalizing industries, gaining popular support with reforms.
So WWI, the war to end all wars, clearly didn't. There was still huge unresolved issues. What were the big ones that led towards WWII?
The mandate system in the Middle East is a key one.
This was about dividing up the old Ottoman and German territory.
Yes, at the Paris Peace Conference, Wilson pushed for self-determination, but Britain and France wanted control.
So they compromised with this mandate system, overseen by the League of Nations.
Right. Different classes of mandates, supposedly based on readiness for independence. Class A was meant to be closest.
In reality.
In practice, Britain controlling Palestine, Iraq and France, Syria, Lebanon often ruled much like old colonial powers.
Frustrating local hopes for real independence.
Exactly, leading to growing anti-colonial movements and unrest in the region.
Meanwhile, in Asia, Japan was on the rise.
Aggressively so. They invaded Manchuria in China in 1931, set up a puppet state, Manchukuo.
For resources.
Vital resources, yes. It was a clear violation of League of Nations principles.
But the League couldn't really stop them.
Proved pretty ineffective. Japan just withdrew from the League when criticized and kept expanding.
Pushing this idea of a Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere.
Under Japanese dominance, yes.
And elsewhere, anti-imperial resistance was growing too. India.
Definitely. The Indian National Congress, led by Gandhi, stepped up demands for self-rule.
Using peaceful protests, civil disobedience. Like the Salt March.
Famously, yes, putting real pressure on the British. Though independence wouldn't come until after WWII.
And in South Africa.
The African National Congress, the ANC, was founded. Educated Africans aiming for equal rights, inspired by Pan-Africanism. Organizing against racial discrimination, though again, success was delayed until much later.
Okay, so all these unresolved tensions simmering. What were the direct causes that finally tipped the world into World War II?
Well, first, that unsustainable peace from Versailles. Just too much resentment.
Italy felt cheated out of territory. Germany crushed by reparations, demilitarization, the war guilt clause.
Perfect fuel for extremists like Mussolini and Hitler to exploit.
Then, continued imperialism. It didn't stop.
Not at all. Japan kept expanding in China and the Pacific. Italy invaded Ethiopia, consolidated its African colonies.
And Hitler started grabbing territory. The Rhineland, Austria, Czechoslovakia.
He's driven by that ideology of Lebensraum, living space,
Well,
and Britain and France's policy of appeasement.
trying to avoid war by giving in.
Yeah, but it just emboldened Hitler, made him think he could get away with more.
And the Great Depression hadn't gone away either.
No, that economic crisis created instability everywhere, made people desperate, more willing to listen to radical leaders promising solutions.
Which brings us to the rise of fascism and totalitarianism itself.
Right, Stalin's totalitarian Soviet Union pushing communism, Mussolini's fascist Italy extreme nationalism, militarism.
And Nazi Germany under Hitler. Ultranationalism, blaming minorities, promising greatness.
Rejecting Versailles, remilitarizing, seeking Lebensraum, and that horrific ideology of racial purity, targeting Jews and others for elimination.
So the stage was set. How was World War II fought? Did it differ much from WWI?
It was definitely another total war, but even bigger, even more brutal. Civilians were targeted directly, systematically.
And the trigger this time was Germany invading Poland. September 1939.
That's generally seen as the start, leading to the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, Japan versus the Allies, Britain, France, later the USSR and US.
USSR joined after Germany attacked them, and the US after Pearl Harbor.
Exactly. And again, massive propaganda efforts on all sides, fostering nationalism, demonizing the enemy, demanding sacrifice.
Did the different ideologies shape how the war was fought?
Profoundly. Fascism's focus on the state and military power made for rapid, ruthless mobilization, often exploiting conquered peoples brutally.
Communism under Stalin meant absolute state control, enabling relentless war production, whatever the human cost.
And even in democracies like Britain and the US, while mobilization relied more on persuasion and democratic processes.
There were still controls, curtailing civil liberties sometimes.
Yes, like the tragic internment of Japanese Americans in the US national security was the justification.
And the military strategies and tech, building on WWI, but more devastating.
Definitely. Blitzkrieg lightning war. Germany used coordinated air power, tanks, infantry for fast breakthroughs, very different from WWI's static lines.
And bombing.
Became a major feature. Strategic bombing of industries, but also firebombing of cities like Dresden and Tokyo by the Allies. Massive civilian casualties.
And then the ultimate escalation.
The atomic bomb. Developed by the U.S., used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, brought the war in the Pacific to a sudden, horrific end, ushered in the nuclear age.
Which brings us, sadly, to the mass atrocities. The scale of suffering is just immense.
It truly is. The wars themselves caused staggering casualties, with more civilians dying than ever before. New tech like aerial bombing played a part.
But it was also the ideologies, wasn't it? Aiming to wipe out entire groups of people.
Exactly. Extremist ideologies targeting populations based on race, ethnicity, politics.
Leading to the Holocaust in Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
The systematic attempt to exterminate Jewish people.
Hitler's final solution. using things like the Nuremberg laws to strip rights, then ghettos, then concentration and extermination camps like Auschwitz. Millions murdered, along with Roma, homosexuals, disabled people, political opponents.
And this wasn't the only genocide of the period. The Armenian genocide during WWI.
In the Ottoman Empire, yes, the Young Turk government orchestrating mass killings and forced deportations of Armenians, hundreds of thousands died.
Then later, the Cambodian genocide under the Khmer Rouge, Pol Pot.
Late 1970s, a radical vision of an agrarian state eliminating Western influence, targeting the educated. Millions died there too.
The Rwandan genocide in 1994, much more recent.
Fueled by ethnic tensions, exacerbated by colonial history, Hutus targeting Tutsis, hundreds of thousands slaughtered in just months after the president's plane was shot down.
And we already mentioned the Holodomor in Ukraine under Stalin.
Forced collectivization, seizing grain, creating a man-made famine. Millions starved. It's a grim list.
So if we try to synthesize all this, the causation in these global conflicts, it's complex.
For WWI, you had those long-term MAIN factors creating instability. The assassination was the immediate spark.
And the effects, massive casualties, collapsed empires, the harsh Versailles Treaty.
Which, along with economic instability, fueled the rise of fascism.
Setting the stage for WWII, long-term causes there, Versailles grievances, the Depression, totalitarian regimes, aggressive expansionism.
With Germany's invasion of Poland being the immediate trigger.
And the political effects of WWII.
Axis defeated, Europe divided, Germany divided, shaping the Cold War. The UN was created, decolonization accelerated.
Human effects, tens of millions dead. The Holocaust leading to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, massive refugee crises.
Economically, huge destruction, but the U.S. emerged dominant. The Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe. Bretton Woods setting up a new financial system.
And technologically.
Big leaps in medicine, radar, aviation, nuclear energy laid the groundwork for post-war consumerism and the space race.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the really crucial takeaways for people listening?
I think the biggest thing is just how interconnected everything was. You really can't understand WWII without understanding the unresolved issues from WWI.
Right. The consequences of one war directly fed into the causes of the next.
And we see these recurring themes. Ideology driving action, economic factors causing instability, shifting power dynamics leading to conflict. They run through the whole period.
And hopefully, for you listening, this overview gives you a solid foundation, a framework for maybe exploring specific parts of this tumultuous century in more depth.
Exactly. Grasping these connections helps appreciate the lasting impact on our world today.
So considering these cycles of conflict, the sheer devastation, what lessons do you think are most critical for us to learn and maybe more importantly, actually apply now?
And as you think about the massive changes we've covered, empires falling, new ideologies rising, technology transforming warfare, what aspect of this whole period sparks the most pressing questions for your own further thinking?